My father showed up at my townhouse door in the middle of a perfectly ordinary Tuesday afternoon, with my stepmother right behind him, both of them, wearing the same tight, concerned expressions they had practiced for years. I had just kicked off my heels after a long day handling client portfolios at the firm when the knock came. One look through the side light, and I knew this was not a casual visit. The envelope in his hand was thick, the kind that usually held bad news dressed up as family business. If you have ever watched someone you trusted arrive at your door with paperwork and a smile that does not reach their eyes, you already understand the particular chill that ran down my back that day. I opened the door anyway. "Hey, Ava," my father said, stepping inside like he still owned the place, even though the deed had been in my name for 6 years. "We need to talk. This won't take long." My stepmother followed without waiting for an invitation, her perfume filling the entryway like she was marking territory. She gave me that soft, pitying smile I had grown to hate. "You look tired, sweetheart. Have you been sleeping?" I did not answer the question. Instead, I led them into the living room and stayed standing while they sat on my couch without being asked. The envelope stayed in my father's lap. I could see the letterhead from Dr. Michael Grant's office peeking out the top. My own doctor, the one I had seen 3 weeks earlier for a routine physical after a stressful quarter at work. My father cleared his throat. "We got a copy of your latest labs and notes." Dr. Grant was concerned enough to flag a few things: memory lapses, trouble focusing, some impulsive spending patterns. He thinks it would be smart for us to step in before anything gets worse. I laughed once, short and sharp. "Dr. Grant said that to you." My stepmother leaned forward, voice dripping with fake warmth. "He called us because he knows how much we care. He said early intervention is everything with these kinds of cognitive changes. We're only trying to protect you, Ava. The investments your mother left you, the townhouse, your accounts at the firm. Someone needs to keep an eye on them while you get this sorted." There it was. The fabricated financial excuse wrapped in concern. My mother had died when I was 22 and left me a modest trust and the townhouse in this private enclave in Greenwich. My father had remarried within 2 years. My stepmother had never hidden how much she resented that the assets had skipped her and gone straight to me. Now they were using cognitive changes and impulsive spending to try to take control. I kept my voice even, but the sarcasm slipped out anyway. How convenient that Dr. Grant suddenly decided I'm losing my mind. Right after I told you last month, I was thinking of moving the trust management to an independent advisor. Almost like someone fed him a story. My father's jaw tightened. He slid the papers across the coffee table. "These are just the preliminary notes. There's a full evaluation scheduled for next week. If you sign the acknowledgement today, we can avoid making this public. No one at your firm needs to know you're struggling." I did not touch the papers. "Subosea Kia, you mean the way you already called my older brother Lucas and told him I was not handling things well. He texted me this morning asking if I needed help with my bills." Nice touch. My stepmother's smile stayed fixed. "Lucas is worried about you, too." "We all are. You've been distant since the holidays. Canceling dinners, skipping the family trip to the Cape. That's not like you. The family trip I had skipped because the last time I went, my stepmother spent the entire weekend joking about how I was still single at 34 and how someone should really take the pressure off you. I had smiled through it then. I was done smiling now. I picked up the top page. The date on the cognitive assessment form was yesterday. The box next to patient shows signs of diminished capacity to manage personal and financial affairs was already checked in neat black ink. My name was printed above the signature line like it was already decided. "You had this filled out before you even knocked on my door," I said quietly. The bitterness in my own voice surprised me. "You didn't come here to talk. You came here to get my signature on something that lets you drain the trust my mother left me and call it protection. My father stood up. His voice dropped into that patient, condescending tone he used when he wanted to remind me he was the reasonable one. Ava, you're being dramatic. This is temporary. Once you're stable again, we can revisit everything. Your stepmother and I have already spoken with the financial advisor at the firm. Daniel Price agrees that co-signing authority would be the safest route for now. Daniel Price, the same advisor who had managed my mother's trust for years and who had lunch with my father every other week. Of course he agreed. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not fear, not even anger yet. Just the clear, sharp recognition that the future my father had always dangled in front of me, the one where I would eventually take a bigger role in his investment circle, where family meant loyalty, had never been real. It was a story he told to keep me compliant until he needed the money and the control. My stepmother reached for my hand. I pulled it back before she could touch me. You don't have to decide right this second, she said, still smiling. But the evaluation is already on the calendar. Dr. Grant is expecting you. If you fight this, it will only look worse when it goes to the court. No one wants that kind of family drama splashed across feelings. I looked at both of them, sitting on my couch in my living room, in the gated enclave I had bought with my own salary and my mother's inheritance. The same people who had promised me years ago that I would always have a seat at the table. The same people who were now trying to have me declared incompetent so they could take the table away. I picked up the papers, walked to the kitchen, and dropped them into the trash can. The sound of the papers hitting the bottom was louder than I expected. You can leave now, I said. My voice was firm. The sarcasm was gone. What was left was something colder and clearer. And if either of you contacts Dr. Grant again without my permission or shows up here uninvited, I will have my lawyer file a restraining order before dinner. My father's face darkened. My stepmother's smile finally slipped. This is exactly what we're talking about, my father said. These outbursts, this paranoia. You're not thinking clearly. I opened the front door and held it. Out. They left without another word. My stepmother paused on the step long enough to say loud enough for the neighbors to hear if any were outside. We're only doing this because we love you, Ava. The door clicked shut behind them. I stood in the quiet of my living room, with the late afternoon light coming through the tall windows, and felt the first real crack in the foundation I had built my adult life on. I had spent years telling myself that the distance between us was just grief and remarriage and different lives, that the promises my father made when I was younger still meant something, that my stepmother's little cuts were just her way of coping. I had been wrong about all of it. The envelope they left behind was still on the coffee table. I had not noticed it until now. It was addressed to me in my father's handwriting. No return address. I picked it up, turned it over, and saw that the seal was already broken. Inside were printed emails. Dozens of them. Between my father and my stepmother. Between my father and Daniel Price. One thread caught my eye immediately because it was dated 3 weeks ago, right after my physical. The subject line read, Re-Ava, Moving the Trust. I sat down on the edge of the couch and started reading. The first email was from my stepmother to my father. She's getting suspicious about the advisor fees. If we don't lock this down soon, she'll move everything, and we lose leverage. Dr. Grant owes you that favor from the golf club. Use it. My father's reply already handled. He'll flag early cognitive concerns on the next visit. She trusts him. Once we have the POA, we can redirect the trust disbursements quietly. She won't even notice until it's done. Another thread with Daniel Price. If she pushes back on co-signing, we can cite the new medical notes. The firm won't want the liability of letting someone unstable manage client money anyway. I read until the words blurred. Then I read them again. They had planned this, not in a moment of panic, not because they were truly worried about me. They had planned it step by step using my own doctor, my own financial advisor, and the convenient story of a grieving daughter who was struggling. The promised future where I mattered to them had never existed. It was just the story they needed me to believe until the numbers added up in their favor. I put the emails down and walked to the window that looked out over the private enclave's manicured grounds. Somewhere out there, behind other tall fences and iron gates, other families were probably having normal Tuesday evenings. I used to think mine was one of them. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From the cold, bitter clarity that comes when you finally stop lying to yourself about the people who raised you. I picked up my phone and texted my lawyer, Laura Simmons. I need to see you tomorrow morning. First thing. Bring everything we have on the trust and any medical authorization forms. Then I texted my therapist, Dr. Olivia Chen. Can we move our session to tonight? Something happened. I did not cry. Not yet. The breakdown would come later when the adrenaline wore off and the real weight of what I had just lost settled in. For now I just stood at the window watching the light fade over the gated streets and let the sarcasm and the bitterness settle into something harder and more useful. Self-respect does not arrive with trumpets. It arrives in moments like this, when you finally see the paperwork for what it is and choose not to sign your own cage. I had no idea yet that the emails were only the beginning, or that somewhere out there, a half-sister I had never met was about to walk into the middle of all of it and change what family even meant. But that night, standing in my own living room with my father's betrayal still warm in my hands, I already knew one thing for certain. I was done being the daughter they could control with smiles and forged concern. Whatever came next, I was going to choose myself. The next morning, I sat across from Laura Simmons in her corner office overlooking Greenwich Avenue. The printed emails spread between us like evidence from a crime scene that had not been reported yet. Laura had been my mother's lawyer before she became mine, and she did not waste time with small talk. She read the thread about Dr. Michael Grant and the cognitive concerns twice, then set the pages down and looked at me with the steady expression of someone who had seen families do this before. They started this weeks ago, she said. The emails make it clear they coordinated with your doctor and with Daniel Price at the firm. If they file for guardianship or even just push for a formal evaluation, they can tie up the trust for months. You need to document everything and consider getting ahead of it. I nodded, but the sarcasm came out before I could stop it. Of course they coordinated. My father always did love a good committee when he wanted something done quietly. And my stepmother never met a financial excuse she couldn't dress up as concern. Laura did not smile. I'm going to draft a letter to Dr. Grant demanding he preserve all records and communications. I'm also going to reach out to Daniel Price and put the firm on notice that any movement on your accounts without your direct written approval will be treated as potential breach. But Ava, if they've already spoken to a judge informally, this could move fast. I left her office with a list of next steps and the same cold clarity I had felt the night before. The promised seat at the family table had been a prop. The only thing real was the paperwork they had prepared to lock me out. By the time I got back to the enclave that afternoon, my father had already called twice. I let both go to voicemail. The third call came while I was standing in my kitchen making coffee I did not want. I answered on speaker. We need to finish the conversation from yesterday, he said, voice tight. Dr. Grant's office called. They're concerned you missed the follow-up they scheduled. This is exactly the kind of thing we're worried about. I stirred the coffee slowly. You mean the follow-up you and my stepmother scheduled without telling me? The one that comes with pre-checked boxes about my capacity. There was a pause, then my stepmother's voice joined the line, smooth and reasonable. Ava, please don't make this harder than it has to be. We spoke with Lucas this morning. He agrees that someone needs to help you with the trust until you're feeling more like yourself. He's willing to be a co-trustee if that makes it easier for everyone. My older brother. Of course they had pulled him in. Lucas had always been the son who stayed close, who played the game, who never questioned the stories my father told about loyalty and family duty. I had spent years telling myself the distance between us was just different lives. Now I wondered how much of it had been deliberate on their end. "Tell Lucas I said thanks, but no thanks," I said. "And tell him the next time he wants to discuss my mental health, he can call me directly instead of running it through the two of you." My father's tone sharpened. "You're being childish. This is about protecting what your mother left you. If you keep refusing help, we will have to go through the courts. That will be public. It will affect your job. Is that what you want?" I ended the call without answering. The threat hung in the quiet kitchen like smoke. That evening I met Dr. Olivia Chen in her small office 2 towns over. She had been seeing me since my mother died, and she knew the family history better than most. I told her about the emails, the pre-checked form, the sudden concern for my impulsive spending and memory lapses. I told her about the call with my father and my stepmother, and how they had already brought my older brother into it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "It sounds like they've been building a narrative for a while. One that positions you as the problem so they can justify taking control. How does that land with you?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "It lands like every other time they needed me to be smaller so they could look bigger. I just didn't want to see it until the paperwork showed up." Dr. Chen nodded. "You have a choice here. You can keep trying to manage their version of the story, or you can start protecting your own. Which one feels more like the woman who bought that townhouse and built her own career?" I left her office with the question still sitting in my chest. I already knew the answer. I just had not admitted how much it was going to cost. The next day, I hired Ethan Brooks. Laura had recommended him after I showed her the full email threads. He was a private investigator who worked mostly with families and estates in Fairfield County, the kind of man who knew how to pull records without making noise. I met him at a coffee shop near the train station, not in the Enclave. I did not want anyone seeing us. Ethan read the emails on his tablet, then looked up. "They've been careful, but not careful enough. The thread with Daniel Price mentions redirecting disbursements. That's something we can trace. If they've already filed anything with the court or with the trust administrator, I'll find it. Give me 48 hours. I nodded. "There's something else. My father mentioned a family trip to the Cape I supposedly canceled because I was distant. I never canceled any trip. I was never invited. Can you check if there are other emails about that, about how they've been describing me to other people?" Ethan's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened. "I'll look." 48 hours later, he called me from his car. "I have the additional emails you asked for, and something else. Your father has been in contact with someone named Isabella Vargas. The messages are older, from about 8 years ago, but they reference a settlement and keeping things quiet for the family. I'm still pulling the full picture, but it looks like there was a child from before he married your mother. A daughter. She's 32 now." I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone pressed to my ear and felt the ground shift under me again. A half-sister. A true heir they had never mentioned. Another secret they had kept while building the story that I was the unstable one who needed managing. Ethan continued, "There's more. One of the newer emails between your father and your stepmother references the Vargas situation in the context of the trust. They were worried you might find out and complicate things. I think that's why they moved so fast on the medical angle. They wanted control before any other claims surfaced." I thanked him, hung up, and stared at the wall for a long time. The emails had leaked into my life like water through a cracked foundation. First the ones I found in the envelope, then the ones Ethan pulled. Now this. Every layer I peeled back showed the same pattern my father and my stepmother, deciding what the rest of us were allowed to know and what we were allowed to have. That night my father called again. I let it ring once, then answered. "We've filed the petition for a temporary conservatorship," he said without preamble. "It's the only way to protect you and the assets. The hearing is in 10 days. If you cooperate, we can keep this out of the newspapers. If you don't, your firm will find out exactly why we're concerned about your capacity." I closed my eyes. 10 days. They had moved faster than Laura expected. "You're going to lose," I said. My voice was quiet but steady. "Not because I'm going to fight you in court, because I'm done letting you write the story." He was silent for a moment. Then he said, "You always did think you were smarter than everyone else. Just like your mother. Look where that got her." The line went dead. I sat in the dark with the phone still in my hand and felt the first real wave of the breakdown I had been holding off. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a slow, heavy unraveling in my chest. The family I had tried to keep together in my head for years was never real. The future they had promised was never real. Even the half-sister I now knew existed had been kept from me so they could maintain the version of the story that served them. I had spent 34 years trying to be the daughter who earned their approval. The one who stayed close enough to matter, but not close enough to threaten. The one who smiled at the little cuts and called them love. I was finished. The next morning I called Ethan back. "I want to meet her," I said. "Isabella Vargas. Can you arrange it?" He hesitated. "She may not want to meet you. From what I've seen, your father paid to keep her existence quiet for a long time. She might see you as part of the problem." "I don't care," I said. "If there's another person out there who knows what it feels like to be erased by the same man, I want to hear it from her. Not from another email." Ethan said he would try. 2 days later, while I was sitting in Laura's office going over the conservatorship filing, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Isabella. Ethan gave me your number. I don't know what you want from me, but if you're looking for an ally against your father, you picked the wrong person. He already took enough from my mother. I'm not interested in his other daughter's problems." I stared at the message until the words stopped making sense. Then I typed back before I could talk myself out of it. "I'm not looking for an ally. I'm looking for the truth. He's trying to have me declared incompetent so he and my stepmother can take control of everything my mother left me. If he did something similar to you, I want to know. Not for revenge. For myself." The reply came faster than I expected. "Meet me tomorrow. 2 p.m. The cafe on Greenwich Avenue near the library. Come alone. If you bring anyone, I'm gone." I put the phone down and looked across the desk at Laura. She was still talking about the hearing timeline, but I had stopped listening. The true heir my father had hidden was no longer a rumor in an old email. She was real. She was angry, and she had agreed to meet me. The conservatorship hearing was 8 days away. My father and my stepmother believed they had already won. They had no idea what else was about to surface. The cafe on Greenwich Avenue was quiet when I arrived at 2 the next afternoon. Isabella Vargas was already there, sitting at a corner table, with her back to the wall, like someone who had learned early not to let people come up behind her. She was 32, with the same sharp jawline. My father had the same way of holding her shoulders that said she expected the worst from any room she entered. She did not stand when I approached. "You look like him," she said instead of hello. "The eyes, the way you scan the room first." I sat down across from her. "I didn't know you existed until 3 days ago." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "That tracks. He paid my mother $20,000 in 1994 to sign papers saying she would never contact him or his real family again. I was 4. She took the money because we were about to lose the apartment. I grew up knowing my father was a check that arrived twice a year and a name I was not allowed to say out loud. The waitress came. We both ordered coffee we did not drink. Isabella opened her bag and pulled out a small stack of old letters and one faded photograph. In it, my father stood next to a much younger woman holding a toddler. He looked happy in a way I had never seen in any picture from my childhood. "He told my mother he was going to leave his first wife for her," Isabella said. Then your mother got pregnant with you, and suddenly the checks got bigger and the visits stopped. When I was 18, I tried to reach out. He had his lawyer send a cease and desist. That was the last time I heard from him until last year, when one of his emails to your stepmother mentioned the Vargas problem in the same paragraph as your trust. I started keeping everything after that. I read the emails she slid across the table. They were the same cold, calculating tone as the ones Ethan had already found. My father and my stepmother discussing how to keep Isabella quiet if she ever resurfaced, how to fold any potential claim into the larger narrative that the family assets needed professional management. They had been worried I might find her and complicate things. That was why the medical angle had been rushed. Isabella watched my face while I read. He does this to every woman who gets too close to what he thinks is his. First my mother, then yours, now you. The only difference is you have money and a lawyer. Most of us just disappear. I felt the breakdown start then quiet and unstoppable, not loud crying. Just the slow, heavy realization that the father I had spent my life trying to please had been erasing people long before I was born. The promised future where I would matter had never been offered to anyone. It was a story he told to keep us all in line until we were no longer useful. "I'm sorry," I said. My voice cracked on the second word. "I'm sorry he did that to you. And I'm sorry I spent 34 years pretending the version of him I wanted was the real one." Isabella's expression softened for the first time. "Don't apologize for surviving the same man I survived. Just don't let him do it to you the way he did to us." We sat there for another hour. She told me about growing up with the checks and the silence. I told her about the pre-checked cognitive form and the emails that had arrived in my living room, like a bomb with a polite note attached. By the time we stood to leave, something had shifted between us. Not friendship yet. Something sharper and more useful. Recognition. My phone rang as we reached the sidewalk. My father. I answered on speaker so Isabella could hear. "The hearing is moved up to tomorrow morning," he said. "No greeting. Your stepmother and I have already spoken with the judge's clerk. If you show up with that lawyer of yours and try to fight this, we will make sure every detail of your recent instability becomes part of the public record. Your firm will hear about it. Your clients will hear about it. You can still avoid all of that if you sign the temporary papers today." I looked at Isabella. She nodded once the smallest movement. "I know about Isabella Vargas," I said. My voice was steady, even though my hands were shaking. "I know about the payments in 1994 and the cease and desist when she was 18. I know you and my stepmother discussed folding her into the same story you're trying to build about me. So here is what is going to happen. I am not signing anything. I am not showing up to your hearing. I am removing myself from the trust entirely. Laura Simmons will file the paperwork this afternoon transferring management to an independent trustee of my choosing. You will get nothing from it. Not control, not information, not even the satisfaction of watching me fight you in court." There was a long silence on the other end. "You're making a mistake," my father said finally. The concern was gone. What was left was cold and flat. "You're throwing away everything your mother wanted for you because you're too proud to accept help." "No," I said. "I'm walking away because I finally understand that the help was never help. It was a transaction, and I'm done paying with pieces of myself." I ended the call. Isabella and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment. The afternoon light was soft on the brick buildings of the enclave. Somewhere behind one of those tall fences, my father and my stepmother were probably already on the phone with Daniel Price and Dr. Michael Grant recalculating their next move. They would still have each other. They would still have the story they told themselves about protecting the family. They would not have me. "I'm not going to use what I know against him," I told Isabella. "Not in court, not publicly. I just needed to know the pattern wasn't only in my head." She gave me a small, tired smile. That's the part that takes the longest, realizing the story you were told about who you are was never about you at all. We exchanged numbers, not because we were suddenly sisters, because we were the only two people left who understood exactly how much had been taken and how little was left to fight for. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off and let the breakdown finish what it had started in the cafe. I cried until my chest hurt and my throat was raw. Not for the father I was losing. For the daughter, I had been the one who had believed that if she just worked hard enough and stayed quiet enough and smiled through enough little cuts, she would eventually be allowed to belong. That girl was gone. I mourned her the way you mourn someone who died believing a lie. When the crying stopped, what was left was quiet and solid. I called Laura and told her to file the removal from the trust first thing in the morning. I called Ethan and asked him to send Isabella copies of every email he had found. I texted my older brother once I know what they did. I'm done. Don't call me again. Then I blocked his number. The next morning, while my father and my stepmother sat in a courtroom expecting me to appear and fight, I signed the papers that severed my financial ties to the family my mother had tried to build. I kept the townhouse. I kept my career. I kept the right to decide who got access to my life. Everything else I let go. It cost me. The trust my mother left had been meant to be a safety net, not a weapon. Walking away from it meant I would have to work harder and plan more carefully for the years ahead. It meant family gatherings were over forever. No more holidays where I pretended the tension was normal. No more phone calls where I measured every word. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was mine. 3 weeks later, I received one last email from my father. It was short. "You'll regret this when you're alone." I did not reply. I deleted it, blocked the address, and went back to the spreadsheet I was building for my own future, the one that did not require anyone else's permission to exist. Isabella and I have met twice since then. We do not call each other sisters. We call each other witnesses. She is building her own life in another state. I am still here in the enclave, but the fences feel different now. They keep people out instead of keeping me in. I still have days when the bitterness rises sharp and sudden, when I remember the pre-checked box with my name on it, and the way my stepmother smiled while she helped build the case against me. On those days, I let myself feel it. Then I put it down and keep choosing the version of my life that does not require me to shrink. My father and my stepmother are still together. They still have their version of the story. They still believe they were protecting the family from someone who could not protect herself. I no longer need them to understand what they did. I only need myself to remember why I walked away. Self-respect does not come with an apology or a victory parade. It comes in the quiet moment when you realize the people who were supposed to love you were keeping score the whole time, and you finally stop playing the game. I chose myself. Not because it was easy, because the alternative was disappearing inside someone else's paperwork and calling it love. If you are sitting with your own stack of emails, or your own pre-checked boxes, or your own father, who only shows up when he needs something signed, I want you to know this. The story they wrote about you is not the only one you are allowed to live. You can put the pen down. You can walk away. It will hurt. It will cost you people and money and the version of family you were promised. But on the other side of that cost is a life that belongs to you and no one else. Would you choose yourself? Thank you for listening to my story.